There is a story that has haunted humanity since we first huddled around fires in the dark. What gives a people the right to call a place home? What gives a people the right to call a place home? Is it the bones of ancestors buried in the soil? Is it the tears shed over centuries of wandering? What gives a people the right to call a place home? Is it a piece of paper signed in a distant capital? Or is it simply the raw, unyielding will to survive? Today, we are going to tell a story. It's a story about a dream that refused to die. It's the story about a people scattered to the four winds, a people who carried a single key in their pocket. They had that key for 2,000 years, always believing that one day they would find the door again. But like all great stories, this story has two sides. This story has two peoples, two truths, and one piece of land. And here is the thing about this story. Or did you say stories, as the case may be? These stories don't begin when we think they begin. The stories ripple backward through time, through prophets and poets, through exile and return. The story I'm about to tell, they flow forward, they flow through us, they flow through our children. The stories flow through choices made in smoke-filled rooms and on battlefields at dawn. I am a storyteller. I tell stories for a living. Am I a teacher? I like teaching. Welcome to the class of stories. Stories make history. Welcome to the class of history, of politics, of power. It is the story of the birth of Israel in 1948. It is a story with varied consequences. Why this story at this time? At this time, Israel is in a war battle, in a war mood. Israel is in a war with Iran. Why Iran? How did we get here? Understanding how we got here will help us understand the Israel-Iran war. The birth of Israel in 1948 to some was a miracle. To others, it was catastrophe. To some, it was both. It was the answer to a prayer said for generations. They said, next year in Jerusalem, next year in Jerusalem. They saw it coming. And that dream was the beginning of a wound that still bleeds today. It bleeds. Many have died. Many are dying. It's a bleeding story. You see, there is a force in this universe. That force is more powerful than armies. That force is more persistent than empires. The Hebrew prophets understood this force. They called it thought. Thought, the power of the mind. Hebrew prophets understood the power of the mind. They called it intention. They called it the word becoming flesh. You say it and it comes. God said, let there be heaven and earth. And there was heaven and earth. It started with words. The prophets, Hebrew prophets, understood the power of words and how to deploy it. So they called it intention. They harbored it in their mind and they said it. In that case, word becoming flesh, let us make man in our own image. And here we are. Long before a single soldier crossed a border, long before a flag was raised over Tel Aviv, this story was already written, not on paper, but in the human heart, in the Jewish soul that refused to be extinguished, in the Palestinian soul that refused to be erased. And when these two forces met, when centuries of longing collided with centuries of rootedness, well, that is when history catches fire. So, come, pull up a chair, relax. You can even light a candle if you want. Just give me your attention. You know why? We are about to journey into the mystery of how thought becomes things, how dreams become nations, and how the silent power within us shapes the world we talk about. This is the story of the birth of Israel. But let me warn, It might also be your own story. Yes, it is your story. Two rivers. In the beginning was the Word, they say. But before the Word, there was the longing. A people bent beneath the weight of wandering. Their pockets empty, but for a key to a door that no longer stood. For 2,000 years, they talked about it in the dark. Hey, hey, next year in Jerusalem, they whispered. The children learned it on their mother's knees. The old ones spoke it with their final breath. And the words became a river. The power of words. They used words to create the state of Israel. What do you do with your words? Do you just bandy words around? Do you take your words seriously? Do you sleep on them? Do you meditate on your words, your dreams? We sat down with a poem. We had two stones in our hands, heavy, real, impossibly ancient. We felt their weight, and we did not look away. Now let us walk into the fire. Why? Every birth is also a wound. I hope you know. When a mother brings forth a child, the mother is wounded. I hope you know. With the birth of Israel came a deep wound. There is a moment in every story. I mean, every true story, when the past stops being past, when it reaches through time and touches you, when you realize that the events you thought were history are actually living things, breathing still, pausing still, wounding still. This is poetry. It's our story. The formation of the State of Israel in 1948. A pivotal event, a turning point. It was the culmination of decades of political struggle, the realization of a dream 2,000 years old, a moment of joy so profound that grown men wept in the streets at the birth of Israel. It was also a moment of catastrophe so deep that it still mourned, still fought over, still unhealed. Gaza, Hezbollah, Fatah, Palestine Liberation Organization. How? What happened? This is the story of how a people scattered to the four winds found their way home. Is it home? This is the story of how another people rooted in that same soil for centuries lost their home. This is the story of two rivers, born of the same rain, rushing towards the same sea, each believing God was in their current, each unable to see the other's source. Pull up a chair. Come closer. Open your ears. Deepen your gaze, you would see the effect of the story. So let us go to the 19th century. In Europe, in the shadow of persecution, for centuries, Jews had lived as a minority in Christian and Muslim lands. Sometimes they were tolerated. Sometimes they were protected. But they were often despised. They were always vulnerable. You see the word pogrom. After the January 1966 coup in Nigeria, it produced an effect. That effect is the counter coup of July 1966. The counter coup produced another effect, the pogrom, the killing of mainly Igbos in the northern region of Nigeria. So that word pogrom is a Russian word. It means to wreak havoc. To wreak havoc. So the word pogrom entered the human vocabulary because of the organized violence against Jewish communities in Eastern Europe. But in Western Europe, something else was happening. Remember, at this time, the Enlightenment had promised emancipation, knowledge. They were now thinking aright. The Jews believed at that time that with the Enlightenment, the mind of man is deepened, broadened, more embracing, more accommodating. That is what enlightenment does to the mind. Clarity of thought. After the Renaissance came the Enlightenment. So the Enlightenment had promised emancipation for Jews scattered around European states. So Jews could become citizens. They could assimilate. Remember the policy of assimilation in French West Africa? The policy of association in West Africa. The colonialists, the French colonialists, felt that the Francophone Africans should behave like French, should eat like the French, should speak like the French. If they did that, they were assimilated. So with the Enlightenment, the Jews saw emancipation, they saw assimilation. They could be Frenchmen for those living in France. They could be Germans for those in Germany. They could be Austrians of the Mosaic persuasion. Many Jews believed that education, reason, culture would eventually dissolve what they termed as the ancient poison of anti-Semitism. Were they wrong? Then came a man called Theodor Herzl. Theodor Herzl. He was born in Budapest in 1860, he was assimilated. German-speaking, Viennese, a journalist, a playwright, a man of the word. Theodor believed in progress. He believed in the future. And he saw the future. And then, in 1894, he was sent to Paris as a correspondent for the Vienna newspaper. His assignment was to cover the trial of a Jewish captain in the French army named Alfred Dreyfus. So as a student of this class, can you research who Alfred Dreyfus is? Expand your knowledge. Do that research to broaden your knowledge. So Theodore was sent to France as a journalist to cover the trial of a Jewish captain in the French army named Alfred Dreyfus. Dreyfus was falsely accused of treason. That is what history is suggesting. Why was he falsely accused of treason in France? Do that research. The evidence brought before him was flimsy. The anti-Semitism was naked. And Theodor Herz watched. He watched with his eyes open as crowds in Paris, the city of light, the city of revolution, the city that had emancipated the Jews, chanted, "Death to the Jews, death to the Jews." Not death to the traitor, not death to the traitor, but death to the Jews. He was reporting it. He saw it in France. In that moment, something crystallized in hers. Something broke, and something was burned. He later wrote in his diary, I quote, "I recognize the emptiness and futility of trying to combat anti-Semitism. That poison could not be cured. It could only be avoided." And so he began to write. In 1896, Herz published a pamphlet, just 86 pages. Have you read the pamphlet? Search for it. You'll find it. Read that pamphlet. Search for it. It's online. I will quote from it. He called the pamphlet Der Judestaat. Der Judestaat, meaning the Jewish state. Meaning the Jewish state. And he wrote these words, words that sing through centuries, words that still echo in our minds, words that changed the definition of a people. Look at what he wrote. He said the Jewish question persists wherever Jews live in appreciable numbers. Wherever it does not exist, it is carried by Jews in the course of their migrations. we are naturally drawn into those places where we are not persecuted, and our appearance there gives rise to persecution. He continues, this is the case and will inevitably be so everywhere, even in highly civilized countries. See, for instance, France. So long as the Jewish question is not solved on the political level. End of quote. Then he proposed a solution. Look at what he said. Let sovereignty be granted us over a portion of the globe large enough to satisfy the rightful requirements of a nation. The rest we shall manage ourselves. Did you get that? He wrote, let sovereignty be granted us over a portion of the globe large enough to satisfy the rightful requirements of a nation. The rest we shall manage ourselves. That pamphlet caused a sensation. It was attacked, it was celebrated, it was debated in synagogues and coffee houses across Europe. The power of a pamphlet, the power of words inscribed on paper, led to discussions in European countries. That is why they say that the pen is stronger than the sword. Where the sword is stronger than the pen, where the sword is stronger than the pen, the people are mostly in poverty. The people are mostly ravaged because in that clime, they are not thinking. Where the pen is stronger than the sword, the people are thinking. In that case, it's a knowledge economy. A knowledge economy. Theodor Herzl's pamphlet caused massive debate in Europe. And the following year after he released the pamphlet, that was in 1897, Herzl did something unprecedented. He convened the first Zionist Congress in Switzerland, Basel to be precise. That was where the Congress was held. The first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland, was convened by Theodor Herzl in 1897. Delegates came from all over Europe. They debated, they disagreed, they argued over language, they argued over culture, over whether the new homeland should be in Palestine or somewhere else. Some suggested Argentina, others wanted them to move to Uganda. But in the end, they agreed in that Congress to move to Palestine. They agreed that Palestine was their historic homeland. They said it was the land of their ancestors, the land they had prayed towards 3 times a day for 2,000 years. The land they had prayed towards 3 times a day for 2,000 years. And that night, in his diary, Hess wrote something remarkable, something that would prove prophetic. He wrote in his diary, I quote, "At Basel, I founded the Jewish state." That's authoritative. He was already seeing the Jewish state. And he wrote in his diary in 1897 that at Basel, I founded the Jewish state. If I were to say this out loud today, I would be greeted by universal laughter. In 5 years perhaps, certainly in 50, everyone will see it. He wrote it in his diary. He said it, the power of words. He wrote about it. He carried people along. He saw the Jewish state. He said it might come in 5 years, but certainly within 50 years, everyone will see it. What do you think? I'll be glad to read your comment. Engage the story. Have you invited your friends to join the story? Tell them the storyteller is streaming. That the story I tell on this day is the story of power, of politics. History is the story. So let's engage. Are you a Muslim? Yeah, I know you are. Oh, you are a Christian? Yeah, that's fine. The story is for you too. It's a story for all. Understanding why Iran and Israel are fighting at the moment. How did the United States come to love Israel so much? Did you know that the United States is the first country to recognize the independence of Israel in 1948? Harry Truman sent the first telegraph to Ben Gurion. The first country in the world to recognize the state of Israel is the United States of America. That was in 1948. Is that why they always fight together? We'll come to that. You have a question for me? You can leave your question in the comment section. So as you listen, I want you to repost. I want you to share the link so that we can take the story further, deeply. Telling the story of time. Arise, O nation. For nations to rise, the human spirit must rise. Let's read. I want to read from this book, History of the Modern World, by B.V. Rao. History of the Modern World. I just want to take you into the Arab world to tickle you. Yeah. Let's read from chapter 31. The Arab world had no identity as such till the birth of Islam in 622 AD. At the time of the death of Prophet Muhammad in 6 732 AD, Islam had spread all over Arabia. Within the next 3/4 of the century, the Islamic Empire, led by the Arabs, spread all over the Middle East, North Africa, and southern part of Spain. The Arabs crossed the Pyrenees and entered France, but they were defeated by Charles Martel in the bloody battle at Tours in 732 AD. The Arabs occupied the southern part of Spain for the next 7 centuries. The people coming under Arab rule were given the choice of either embracing Islam or pay a tax or face death. Islam has always been radical. In course of time, the Arab Empire split into 3 caliphates: the Abbasid of Baghdad, the Fatimid of Cairo, and the Umayyad of Damascus, later known as Cordoba. The caliphs of the time, who were considered as the true representatives of Prophet Muhammad, exercised spiritual and temporal powers. They tried to establish equality and universal brotherhood among all Muslims. They encouraged learning, art, literature, science, trade, and commerce. Is this not the golden age of Islam? The author continues, the Islamic Empire, built by the Arabs, could boast of great centers of learning like Baghdad, Cairo, Damascus, Cordoba, Seville, and Barcelona. Did you hear Barcelona? Did you hear Seville? The Arabs conquered that part of Spain for 7 centuries. I am reading from the book, A History of the Modern World by B.V. Rao. B.V. Rao continues, Islam was split into 2 sects, namely the Sunnis and the Shias, in the second half of the 7th century AD. The Sunnis strictly conform to the Sunnah, that is custom, usage, and form regarding all the matters, and look to the Quran for direction. The Shias hold the opinion that Abu Bakr and his 2 successors were usurpers, and they maintained that Ali was the legitimate successor to the Islamic Caliphate. The Arabs in majority belong to the Sunni sect, and the majority of Iranians belong to the Shia sect. The Ottoman Empire took birth after replacing the Byzantine Empire, and the capital of Ottoman Empire was at Constantinople, and it was born in 1453. Ottoman Empire reigned. Constantinople is now called Istanbul in Turkey. Turkey was the headquarters of the Ottoman Empire. So you could say Turkey governed the world It was the biggest empire at some point, the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire collapsed at the end of First World War. Now, the Ottoman Empire gave rise to what is known as Pan-Islamism. After the fall of the Ottoman, History of the Modern World by B.V. Rao. Reading is feeding the mind. Feed the mind. It is the story of the birth of Israel. Remember, a dream is never enough. Yeah, you can dream of what you want to be. It starts from there, but it is never enough. A dream needs a door. In this case, a dream needs politics. A dream needs the great powers to say yes. And that door opened in 1917, November 2nd, to be precise. World War was raging at this time. The British Empire was locked in a death struggle with the Ottoman Empire, which had ruled Palestine for 4 centuries. Remember, I just told you the Ottoman Empire was born in the 15th century. So part of the territories the Ottoman Empire governed was the present Palestine, including the present Israel. At this time, the British Empire was locked in a death struggle with the Ottoman Empire, which had ruled Palestine for 4 centuries. The British needed allies. They wanted to defeat the Ottomans. So they began to sow divisions among not Arab states, but among Arabs who were controlling communities. They began to negotiate with them. Let's defeat the Ottomans. Because the Ottomans were also oppressing Arabs. The British needed allies, they needed support, and they made promises to the Arabs. On the 2nd of November 1917, the British Foreign Secretary, Otto James Balfour, wrote a letter. The letter was addressed to Lord Rothschild, a leader of the British Jewish community. That is one name I want you to research. Rothschild. It's a big name, Rothschild. Look at it, research it. It will inspire you. It's a story. Perhaps someday I will also tell the story here. Lord Rothschild was a leader of the British Jewish community. And the letter that Balfour sent to him was a short one. Just 67 words. But those words would change the world. Let's read Balfour's letter to Rothschild. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and we use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. Remember, we are telling this story from the 19th century. It is deeper than that, but we are starting from the 19th century, when the dreams of the Jews began to crystallize, starting with the words of Theodor Herzl. Let's read Balfour's letter to Rothschild again. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and we use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. How did the British government find itself writing this letter? How come it was the British government that confirmed the right of Jews to live in Palestine? We'll come to that. So that letter to Rothschild is also what is today known as the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration was a major diplomatic victory for the Zionist movement. It was the first time a great power had officially endorsed the dream of a Jewish homeland. But here is the wound hidden in those words, the seed of all the sorrow to come. Because at that very moment, the British had made another promise to the Arabs, to the Sharif Hussein of Mecca, the guardian of the holy place of Islam. The British made similar promise to the Arabs, to the Sharif Hussein, the guardian. Fight with us to defeat the Ottomans, and we will help you attain independence. Balfour's letter to Rothschild, a Jewish homeland will be created. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people. Balfour's Declaration. And the next moment, a promise to the Arabs, to Sharif Hussein of Mecca, the guardian of the holy places of Islam. In correspondence with the British High Commissioner in Egypt, Sir Henry McMahon, the British had promised Hussein an independent Arab state in exchange for leading an Arab revolt against the Ottoman Empire. So you can see why I read from the book, History of the Modern World. Here we are talking about one land, two promises, three faiths, and the third promise. The British also made a secret agreement with France, and that is what is known as the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Take note of this. The British also made a secret agreement with the French, known as the Sykes-Picot Agreement. The agreement was to divide the Ottoman territories between themselves after the war. British government promised Israel a homeland, promised Arab nations independence, but signed a deal with France that at the end of World War I, they will divide Ottoman Empire among themselves. Are you seeing deception or what? What can you see? Let me see. What can you see? I'm on X now. I'm trying to see what you can see. So can you share your comments? Okay. We're here to I see. I'm on YouTube, okay. Let's see who is engaged in the story. Engage the story. Engage the story. I can see, as you engage the story, also leave your name so that I will know who is, sometimes the name you use online. Keep engaging the stories. I will take your comments as we go. I've not found this comment that is engaged in the story. So the land was promised to everyone. And therefore, in a sense, the land was promised to no one. So, First World War ended, and the Ottoman Empire collapsed, and the League of was born. And the League of Nations is the precursor to the United Nations. When it was born, it faced a question: what to do with all the territories that were governed by the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire had collapsed. So what do we do with those territories governed with the Ottoman Empire? The Arabs were expecting independence. Their answer was the mandate system. The League of Nations came out with the mandate system. So what the League of Nations did was to grant the victorious powers the right to colonize the former Ottoman Empire territories in the Arab world. But the League of Nations did not use the word colonize, but that was what happened. The League was saying that they would help them towards independence. They will hold them in trust. So on the 24th of July, 1922, the League of Nations formally granted Britain the mandate for Palestine. You can see how Britain came into the story. It was through the mandate of the League of Nations. Go and take care of Palestine. And here is the crucial detail. The mandate incorporated the language of the Balfour Declaration, word for word. Balfour sent a letter to Rothschild, and at the end of the war, the League of Nations granted a mandate to Britain to take care of Palestine, part of former Ottoman Empire. But that mandate was a rehashing of the letter that Balfour wrote to Rothschild. The mandate incorporated the language of the Balfour Declaration, word for word. It tasked Britain with placing the country under such political, administrative, and economic conditions as will secure the establishment of the Jewish national home, while also safeguarding the civil and religious rights of all the inhabitants of Palestine, irrespective of race and religion. How did they expect there was going to be peace? You are granting Palestine to be a home of the Jews. People were living there. The Jewish had abandoned their lands after they faced persecution many years ago, according to history. And now they want to return. The League did not consider that it was going to lead to crisis. I want to take a break. Just hold on. Don't go away. Stay tuned. It's going to be brief. I just want to take water.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime, Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God. I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel, and God bless America. Thank you very much.
On July 24, 1922, the League of Nations formally granted Britain the mandate for Palestine. And I talked about the crucial detail. The mandate incorporated the language of the Balfour Declaration, word for word. It tasked Britain with placing the country under such political, administrative, and economic conditions as will secure the establishment of the Jewish national home, while also safeguarding the civil and religious rights of all the inhabitants of Palestine, irrespective of race and religion. But there was a tension built into these words, a tension that would never be resolved, because the Jewish national home required Jewish immigration, and Jewish immigration required land, and land belonged for centuries to the people already living there. The people the mandate called the existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. That was how the mandate described them. The existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. The people we now call Palestinians. For the next 25 years, Britain tried to hold these two communities together. And it was like trying to hold water in cupped hands. The water ran through their fingers, and the running water would later become a river of blood. Jewish immigration grew. In the 1920s and 1930s, tens of thousands of Jews came to Palestine. Some were idealistic Zionists, dreaming of building a new society. Some were fleeing poverty and persecution in Eastern Europe. And some, increasingly, desperately, were fleeing the rise of Nazism in Germany. By this time, Adolf Hitler and company were already rousing the people of Germany, tilting the population towards Nazism, supremacy of the German race. The Jews in Germany became target. This was before Hitler took power. So many Jews began to run away from Germany, and their direction was now Palestine. Look at this book. Oh, these are books from the archives. Berlin, The Downfall, 1945. Berlin, The Downfall, 1945. In this book, you'll find the Jewish story, the story of the Holocaust. In this book, it's a book written by Anthony Beevor, Berlin, The Downfall, 1945. Anthony Beevor also wrote the book Stalingrad. Stalingrad. It is the story of the Second World War. Before Hitler triggered that war, Jews in Germany were already being persecuted. And with the rise of Nazism, they began to run away too. Many of them began to run towards Palestine. As they were landing in Palestine, the Arab population watched with growing alarm. What's going on? Where are they coming from? They saw their land being bought often from absentee landlords. Their lands were being bought by Jewish organizations. Who were they paying the money to? Not to them. They were asked, what is going on? They saw their villages changing by the day. More populations were coming from Europe into Palestine. Jewish migration. They were migrating. Many of them were fleeing poverty and persecution in Eastern Europe. They were fleeing the rise of Nazism in Germany. In 1920, 1921, 1929 came waves of violence in Palestine. In 1936, a full-scale Arab revolt that lasted 3 years. The Arabs said, no way, we are not going to take it. Strangers have come to take our lands. And the Jews were saying, no, our ancestors lived here. I'm not going to that side of the story. It can be so controversial. That is not to say we won't go there. But we are looking at the birth of Israel. They saw that their villages were changing. They saw their world shifting beneath their feet. And they rose up. In 1936, a full-scale Arab revolt that lasted 3 years ensued. The British were still governing Palestine, and the British crushed the revolt. The British violently crushed the revolt. But it taught the British a lesson, and they began to shift their policy. They saw that their policy had backfired. In 1939, on the eve of World War II, Britain issued a white paper, a policy document that drastically restricted Jewish migration. Britain is saying no more. Jews, you can't come in that number anymore. Only 75,000 more Jews would be allowed into Palestine over the next 5 years. After that, immigration would require Arab consent. For the Jews of Europe, trapped between Hitler and the British Navy, this was death sentence. So many of them were already on the sea. Britain had blockaded them. You can't come into Palestine in that number anymore. They were running out of food on the high sea. They could not go back. Going back was death. Hitler was rising, and Hitler had begun to kill Jews in the whole of Europe. They were faced with death, and they were ready to die. The devil and the deep blue sea, they had nowhere to escape to. So for them it was death sentence. Then came the ovens. The 1945. The word emerged from the Second World War to discover the unspeakable 6 million Jews, 1/3 of the Jewish people murdered. In Germany, the Nazis went on a cleansing exercise. They were mopping up Jews from home to home. The pogrom in Nigeria in 1966 will tell you the story. Many Jews were arrested and taken to gas chambers. They were smoked to death with gas. At the end of the war, 6 million Jews lost their life. They were the biggest casualties. And that is what is known as the Holocaust. So at the end of the war, the world began to saw what had happened to the Jews in different parts of Europe, in Poland, in France, in Russia, in Germany. The conscience of the world was rattled. Why Jews? In Germany, they were very enterprising. They worked very hard. They were creatives. Albert Einstein was a Jew. Did you know? Albert Einstein was a Jew. That great scientist, Albert Einstein, he was a Jew. He was lucky to have escaped to America. He was among the Jews that were lucky to escape to America. And you saw what he became? Today we talk about MC square. Relativity theory propounded by Albert Einstein. This is a book you should read. It is the definitive biography of Albert Einstein. How did Einstein's mind work? What made him a genius? So in this book, Walter Isaacson's biography shows how Einstein's scientific imagination sprang from the rebellious nature of his personality. His fascinating story is a testament to the connection between creativity and freedom. Isaacson explores how an imaginative, impertinent patent clerk, a struggling father in a difficult marriage who couldn't get a teaching job or a doctorate, became the locksmith of the mysteries of the atom and the universe. Einstein, His Life and Universe, by Walter Isaacson. You can also call the book Genius. That's the title. It is the story of Albert Einstein. He was a Jew. Have you wondered why the Jews are so powerful in America? It is the story of the birth of Israel. So 1945, the end of World War II, the world discovered the unspeakable 6 million Jews, 1/3 of the Jewish people murdered. They were murdered not in battle, but in factories of death, the gas chambers, in farms of ashes, in places with names that would forever echo with horror. You must have heard of Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor. The Jews were gassed to death by the Nazis, the fascists. So the survivors, those hollow-eyed men and women who had walked through the valley of the shadow, emerged from those camps And they began to ask questions. Where can we go? People who have been locked up throughout the war, many of them gassed to death, and few survived it. They were now asking, where do we go to? They tried to go back to some of their former homes, but their homes were gone. The war has destroyed everything. In some cases, other people have occupied their homes. Some found their homes simply empty. They tried to go to America. Some of them succeeded, but few. There was a quota system. We cannot take more than this number of Jews. They tried to go to Palestine. The British, still enforcing the 1939 White Paper, turned them away, and they were stuck in the sea. Ships filled with refugees, with numbers tattooed on their arms, were intercepted off the coast of Haifa. Some were sent back to Europe, to the same continent where their families had been born. The most famous of these ships was the Exodus 1947. I want you to research that. The ship Exodus 1947. That was one of the famous ships. That ship left France with 4,500 Holocaust survivors bound for Palestine. The British Navy intercepted the ship. The passengers were forcibly transferred to other ships and sent back to Germany to displaced persons camps in the very country that had murdered their families. The word washed, photographs flashed around the globe, and the moral pressure became unbearable. The situation was impossible. The British, exhausted by war and facing violent opposition from Jewish militias in Palestine. Remember, some Jews had already arrived in Palestine, and they have formed what some will describe today as terrorist organizations to terrorize Britain and those living in Palestine at the time. Some of these organizations were Irgun. You can Google Irgun. You can also look at the word Lehi. Irgun is I-R-G-U-N. The so-called terrorist organization formed by the Jews to fight the British, to lift the embargo on Jews. There was also the Haganah. They began to get involved in guerrilla warfare. They began to kill Jewish officials in Palestine. They began to attack Palestine villages. They began to use violence to make their point. Israel was born in the fire of violence, and that violence hasn't stopped. Israel was created with violence, and that violence hasn't stopped. So these Jewish militias wanted Britain to give up the mandate. They wanted independence. And Britain got confused. By this time, Britain had become weaker. Second World War had exhausted Britain. So Britain was looking for a way out. They wanted to abandon Palestine. They were tired at this time. They wanted to leave. And Britain then went back to the brand new United Nations. The League of Nations by this time was gone. And the United Nations had been born. Born in 1945 at the end of Second World War. In 1947, the United Nations formed a special committee known as the United Nations Special Committee on Palestine. 11 nations, months of investigation, weeks of testimony. The committee visited Palestine. They visited the displaced persons camps in Europe. They heard from Jews. They heard from Arabs. They heard from the British. And on the 3rd of September 1947, the committee issued their recommendation. What was the recommendation? Partition, divide Palestine among the Jews and the Arabs. That was their recommendation. Divide the land into 2 states. One is the Jewish state, and the other an Arab state. And Jerusalem, the most controversial part of Palestine, the city of gold, the city of grief, holy to Jews, holy to Christians, holy to Muslims. Jerusalem was placed under international administration as a corpus separatum, a separate body belonging to no nation, but to all humanity. Jerusalem belonged to no one from that recommendation. If the Arabs had accepted the recommendation of the UN committee, perhaps today we'll be talking of a Palestinian state living side by side with Israel. The Arabs did not accept the recommendation of the United Nations Committee. The Jews accepted it. The Jewish population, about 1/3 of the people, would receive about 55% of the land. Was that fair? And the land that was given to the Jews were mostly the coastal plain, the Galilee, and the Negev desert. The Arab population, about 2/3 of the people, would receive 45% of the land, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and parts of Galilee. It was not a perfect recommendation. It was not what either side truly wanted, but it was something. The Jews debated, and then, despite the pain of giving up Jerusalem, despite the fear of what might come, the Jews accepted the recommendation of the United Nations. The Arabs rejected it. They rejected it completely, totally. The Arab Higher Committee declared, I quote, "The Arabs of Palestine will never accept partition. The only way to establish a Jewish state is to drive the Arabs out and take their place." Were they not right? That's why they rejected it. Because it simply means that the Palestinians who were living in the part that the UN had granted Israel will have to move to the Arab side. And that wasn't feasible for the Arabs. They didn't accept it. At this time, the Arab League was born. The newly formed Organization of Arab States announced that if partition was implemented, they would intervene by force. Let's read again from History of the Modern World, by B.V. Rao. Let's read. Let's read from page 383. Why President Nasser gave a fillip to Arab nationalism at the height of Western imperialism. There was another development in the Arab heartland. The movement was associated with the promotion of Arab nationalism, that is, the establishment of the Arab League. 7 Arab nations, namely Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen, signed an agreement in the Egyptian capital of Cairo on the 22nd of March, 1945, relating to Arab unity and nationalism. The main purpose of this league was to promote Arab unity, peaceful settlement of disputes, if any, among themselves, and forge a united front during the time of war. However, the immediate purpose was to coordinate their activities for launching military, economic, and diplomatic offensives against Israel. Are you there? We are looking at the Arab League now. Subsequently, 15 other Arab nations joined the Arab League to convert it into an association of Arab states and to work within the framework of the United Nations Charter. The headquarters of the expanded Arab League was located at Tahrir Square in Cairo. In the course of time, the Arab nation states agreed to work along the following principles. Each Arab state should respect the sovereignty of the other member states. All member states should work in unison for strengthening their relations. Each member state shall cooperate with other member states in matters like trade and commerce, cultural promotion, and bring about emotional integration. That was the birth of the Arab League. And the Arab League, by 1945 when it was formed, announced it would not accept partition. That if partition was implemented in Palestine, they would intervene by force. Then came the 29th of November, 1947. The United Nations General Assembly convened at Flushing Meadows, New York. Delegates from 56 nations took their seats. Why were they there? Why were they there? They were there to vote on Resolution 181, the partition plan. So the United Nations needed to vote to approve the partition plan. Israel was there lobbying. Arab nations did not bother to lobby. They have rejected the plan. Did I say Israel was there lobbying? The Jews were there lobbying. Arabs were not there to lobby. If they were there at all, they were not as aggressive as the Jews. On that day, the world held its breath. One by one, nations voted. Afghanistan voted no. Argentina abstained from the vote. Australia voted yes. Belgium voted yes. Bolivia, yes. Brazil abstained. Canada, yes. Chile abstained. China did not vote. Colombia abstained. Have you noticed most South American countries abstained? Costa Rica voted yes. Cuba voted no. If America says yes, Cuba will always say no. Czechoslovakia voted yes. Denmark, yes. Dominican Republic, yes. Ecuador, yes. That's a South American country. Ecuador did not abstain. Egypt was there. Egypt voted no. El Salvador voted yes. Ethiopia was the only African country that voted and that was a member of the UN at the time. What about Liberia? Why was Liberia not there? Because Liberia by this time was independent. Nigeria wasn't independent. So Nigeria did have a place at the United Nations in 1947. Most African countries were not independent, so they didn't have a place at the United Nations. France voted yes. Greece voted no. Guatemala, yes. Haiti, yes. Honduras abstained. Iceland voted yes. What about India? India voted no. History. Iran voted no. Iraq voted no. Lebanon voted no. These were Arab states. Norway voted yes. Pakistan voted no. Panama abstained. Paraguay voted yes. Peru in South America, yes. Philippines, yes. Poland, yes. Saudi Arabia, no. You know, most of these Arab states had independence before African states. We'll come to that at some point. South Africa voted yes. South Africa at this time was under apartheid government. Sweden voted yes. Syria, no. Turkey abstained. Why did Turkey abstain? Was Turkey angry about how the Arabs conspired with Europe to defeat the Ottomans? So at this time, perhaps Turkey was sitting down and looking to say, okay, you Arabs, you wanted Europeans, you joined them to defeat the Ottoman Empire. So now face it. And we have to ask, why did Turkey not vote? I'll have to look at that. Turkey was at some point the most powerful country in the world. They controlled the Ottoman Empire. The remnant of the Ottoman Empire is Turkey today. Ukraine voted yes, but Ukraine was under the Soviet Union at this time. The Soviet Union voted yes. United Kingdom voted yes. Okay, United Kingdom abstained. They wanted to be neutral because they already had the mandate, so they wanted to be neutral, so they abstained. The United States voted yes. Uruguay voted yes. Venezuela abstained. Yemen, Arab country, voted no. Yugoslavia abstained. You know, when you abstain, you are not counted. If those that abstained had voted no, the result would have been different. All Arab nations voted no. So the final result, 33 countries voted yes, 13 voted no. The yes have it. 10 countries abstained, and Resolution 181 is passed. The State of Israel has been approved by the United Nations. In the galleries, Jewish observers wept. In Tel Aviv, thousands poured into the streets. They were dancing, singing, embracing strangers. In Jerusalem, David Ben-Gurion, the chairman of the Jewish Agency, the man who would become Israel's first prime minister, stood at a window and watched the celebrations below, and he could not join them. He later wrote, "I could not dance. I could not sing that night. I looked at them so happy and dancing, and I could only think that they were all going to war." He was right. The next day, November 30th, 1947, a bus near the town of Lida was attacked. 5 Jews were killed, and the civil war had begun. The United Nations voted that the State of Israel should be created. The next moment, a civil war began in Palestine, even before the flag of Israel was raised. The months that followed were brutal. Jewish and Arab communities, once neighbors, became enemies. Convoys were ambushed. Villages were attacked. Jerusalem was besieged. 100,000 Jewish residents cut off from the coast, their food and water running out. The Arabs had the advantage of numbers and territory. But the Jews had something else: desperation. They had nowhere else to go. This was the last bus stop. They were going to die. Ben-Gurion later said, "If we lose this war, we will have lost everything. There will be no second chance." And therefore, the Jews were ready to die. They fought with their last pint of blood. In April 1948, 2 events occurred that would haunt the conflict forever. On the 9th of April, 1948, at the village of Dar Yassin, near Jerusalem, Jewish irregular forces, the Irgun and Lehi, attacked. The village had signed a non-aggression pact with its Jewish neighbors, but that did not save that Palestine village, an Arab village. Over 100 Arab civilians, women, children, and old men were killed by the Jewish militants. The news spread like wildfire. The Arab press reported it, the Jewish press reported it, and terror took root in the hearts of Palestinian Arabs everywhere. If this could happen in Dar Yassin, it could happen anywhere. Thousands upon thousands of Arab Palestinians began to flee. It's like what the Fulanis do. The bandits, at night, they besiege a village and wipe out our people. That was what the Jews did to that Palestine village in 1947. And when you do that, you send fear into the inhabitants. The way those in Benue will run away, they are now displaced. The Palestine Arabs began to run away from their villages. A month later, on the 13th of May, Arab forces attacked Var Enzion, a Jewish settlement south of Jerusalem. The defenders, men and women, some of them Holocaust survivors, held out for days. They fought back. Finally, they surrendered in that settlement. They surrendered by raising the white flag to say we want peace, but that did not save them. The Arabs opened fire on them. More than 120 Jews were killed. Dar Yassin, the attackers shouted. Dar Yassin was the Palestine village that the Jews attacked first. They fired, and the circle of vengeance was already spinning. And so we come to the 14th of May, 1948. The British mandate was set to expire at midnight on that day. The last High Commissioner, General Sir Alan Cunningham, had already left. That afternoon, he drove through the streets of Haifa to the port, boarded a Royal Navy ship, and sailed away. Britain said, "We are done. You guys sort yourselves out." Sir Alan Cunningham left, and the British flag was lowered. The British flag was lowered. 3 decades of British rule was over. The mandate was over. In Tel Aviv, at the Municipal Museum on Rothschild Boulevard, a modest white building, nothing grand, a small group of men gathered. They were the Mahiland Ham, the People's Administration, the leadership of the Jewish community. That morning, they had received terrible news. Var Enzion had fallen. The Arabs had attacked again on that day. But it was not going to stop the leadership of the Jewish community to declare independence because the British had left. There cannot be a vacuum. The survivors, those who were not killed in Var Enzion, were taken prisoner. The southern approach to Jerusalem was now open to the Arabs. In the afternoon of that day, as the Sabbath approached, as the sun began to lower over the Mediterranean, David Ben-Gurion stood there. He had a sheet of paper. The ink was barely dry. The room was small. Maybe 200 people could fit. There were no cameras, no live broadcast, just a few dozen men and women, witnesses to history. And Ben-Gurion began to read. The Lord of Israel. Ben-Gurion began to read. The land of Israel was the birthplace of the Jewish people. Here their spiritual, religious, and political identity was shaped. Here they first attained to statehood, created cultural values of national and universal significance, and gave to the world the eternal book of books. That's the Bible. They said from that land. Ben-Gurion paused. His voice was rough with emotion. He continues, after being forcibly exiled from their land, the people kept faith with it throughout their dispersion and never ceased to pray and hope for their return to it and for the restoration in it of their political freedom. He read on through the history, through the justification, through the names of those who had built and dreamed. And he says, we, the members of the National Council, representing the Jewish people and the Zionist movement, hereby proclaim the establishment of a Jewish state in Erez. Erez is the Jewish form of Israel. It is to be known as the State of Israel. That is the Declaration of Independence. 25 men signed their names to that piece of paper. And then Rabbi Yehuda, an old man with a white beard, rose and recited the ancient blessings. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has kept us alive, sustained us, and brought to us this season. That was the prayer of the rabbi. Tears streamed down faces. Grown men wept like children at the birth of Israel. But even as they spoke these words, the guns could be heard in the distance. The Arabs were coming. As they were declaring independence, the Arabs were coming. Israel's flag is now flying in Palestine. And the Arabs would not take it. Few minutes after Ben-Gurion finished speaking, a telegram arrived at the Jewish Agency office in New York, and it was from the White House, from President Harry Truman. The telegram reads, "This government has been informed that a Jewish state has been proclaimed in Palestine, and recognition has been requested by the provisional government thereof. The United States recognizes the provisional government as the de facto authority of the new state of Israel." The United States was the first nation to recognize Israel. Within hours, the Soviet Union recognized Israel. But even as the congratulations arrived, the sirens began to wail. That evening, few hours after the declaration, Egyptian bombers appeared in the sky over Tel Aviv. They dropped their payloads on the city, on the very street where the people had danced just hours before. At midnight, as the British mandate officially expired, the armies of 5 Arab nations crossed the borders. From the north came Syria and Lebanon. It was the invasion of Israel. They were going to finish them that night. From the east came Transjordan Arab Legion, attacking the Jews. From the south, Israel was firing. From the south, Egypt was firing. And from Iraq, an expeditionary force, 1,000 strong, attacked the state of Israel. The new state of Israel was born into war. On the day of independence, Arab nations attacked Israel. Look at this book, World Politics in a New Era. World Politics in a New Era. If you open to, if you open to page 211 of this book, the authors of this book are Steven Spiegel, Elizabeth Matthews, and Jennifer Torr, and Christine Williams. If you look at page 211 here, you see Arab-Israeli confrontations. The first major confrontation was 1948 to 1949 war. That is the War of Israel's independence. Israel, following its declaration of independence in 1948, is attacked by the Arab countries surrounding it. Egypt captured Gaza, Jordan captures the West Bank and the old city of Jerusalem. Israel also increases in size. Many Palestinians become refugees, and a Palestinian state does not emerge. That same night, a Palestinian state would have emerged if the Arabs wanted it, but they didn't agree with the recommendations of the United Nations. So the intention of the Arab states was to invade the small new nation and capture it. That was their intention that day. But they met a people ready to die. The Jews fought and resisted. You have the 1956 war, the Suez Crisis. There's the June 1967 war. Arab nations again did not give up. In 1973, they attacked again. We'll come to those wars. If you can find this book, World Politics in a New Era, it gives you the history of the word, the analysis. You know, I read this book when I was studying international relations. It was my main textbook. It was my main textbook. I so enjoyed it that I could quote the book from page to page then. So Arab nations attacked Israel. The war that followed lasted 15 months from 1948 to 1948 to 1949. And that war brought profound changes to Palestine. Israel had not only survived, Israel at the end of the war had expanded. Its borders now encompass not just the territory allotted by the United Nations Partition Plan, but nearly 80% of mandatory Palestine. Like Sperbeck said in the book I just talked about, the West Bank was occupied and annexed by Transjordan, which promptly renamed itself Jordan. It now moved from Transjordan to Jordan. You still have Jordan sharing border with Israel. Gaza Strip came under Egyptian military control, and Jerusalem, the city of peace, was divided, the western half under Israeli control, the eastern half, including the old city and the holy places, under Jordanian control. And there was another outcome, one that would pierce through every generation to come. Approximately 700,000 Palestinian Arabs, due to that war, became refugees. They had no place to live. Some fled. Israel expelled some of them. Some left their villages believing they would return in a few weeks after the Arab armies had won. They did not return. Their villages were destroyed, and their villages were repopulated. Their villages simply disappeared from the map. Palestinians called this the Nakba, the catastrophe. When they lost the war, they called it the Nakba, the catastrophe. It is the central fact of their national existence, as the Holocaust is the central fact of modern Jewish existence. That was their own Holocaust, and they blamed the Jews. Two peoples, each carrying a wound, each convinced of their own victimhood, each unable to fully see the other's pain. David Ben-Gurion stood before the Knesset, Israel's new parliament, in 1949 and declared, "This is only the beginning. The state of Israel is established, but the work is not done. We must bring the exiles home. We must build the land. We must make the desert bloom. And we must make peace with our neighbors. For without peace, there is no security, and without security, there is no peace," he concludes. But peace did not come. It has not come yet. The Arab states, defeated, refused to recognize Israel. They imposed the boycott of Israel. They closed their borders, and they waited for the next round. The next round was another big war in the 1950s. And the refugees, the 700,000, settled in camps in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Gaza. They raised children who were taught that home was not where they lived, but where their grandparents had lived. They raised children who carried keys to houses that no longer existed, keys to a door that might one day open again. Mahmoud Darwish, the great Palestinian poet, would later write, "We have a country of words. Speak, speak, so that I can see you." So here we are, May 14, 1948. A dream, 2,000 years old, becoming flesh. A catastrophe born in the same hour. Two peoples reaching for the same piece of home. Hey, the Hebrew prophets understood something that we forget at our peril. That outward events are always the working out of inner forces. That the silent power of thought, the collective thought of a people, their hopes, their fears, their dreams, their wounds, shapes the word we walk upon. The Jewish people dreamed of a home, and home was given. The Palestinian people feared losing theirs, and loss came. And now, 3/4 of a century later, we are still living inside that moment, still fighting that war, still trying to find a way to hold two truths in one hand. So, that is the story of the birth of Israel. What do you think about the story? Thank you for always being part of the stories. More stories will come. Tomorrow is another day. And tomorrow we are going back to the cool stories. The cool stories. The January 15, 1966 stories. Soon we'll be talking about the counter coup. So, everything being equal, we'll be here again tomorrow. Thank you for being there.